Hello everybody, I hope you all had a very nice start into the new year. And in my first video of 2020 I will show you how I made a 1950s Christmas or winter themed dress. As main inspiration for this dress served the fabric I bought, which has a little polar bear and a boy on it, and it seemed quite appropriate for Christmas and winter in general. The second fabric is a cotton satin in a very vibrant red that matches the red on the bear's shawl. I picked this dress off a 1950s fashion catalogue to be my main inspiration for the dress. It has a green ballet print all over it, and I think with this cute print and solid color details it matched my dress idea very well. As you should be, I started out as the mock-up, and I cut it from a similar weight white cotton. I just cut the bodice because the skirt is just a rectangle and very hard to screw up. As any mock-up, the bodice gets assembled just as you would do on the real dress, but you will see the construction details in a few minutes. When the mock-up was assembled, I tried it on and marked all the changes while wearing it. Then I transferred them to the paper pattern, and then I traced all around the altered pattern and recut it from paper, just so that I have a neater pattern to work with, but this step is completely up to you. Then I started cutting the bodice out from a real fabric. I traced around the pattern with a pencil and then cut it out with vague seam allowances in mind. When the pattern is marked on both sides, the seam allowance doesn't need to be completely accurate. I did the very same for the facing, and I cut both the bodice and the facing on the fold, in the center front as well as in the center back, because the dress will close with a zipper on the side. As I said, the skirt panels are just 2 rectangles. For them I measured my desired length with the seam allowance up, which was about 92 centimeters for me, I think. Then I made a very small notch with my scissors and ripped the fabric at that point. This method makes sure that the fabric is exactly on the grain, which makes the finished garment more exact in the end. After everything was cut, I was ready to assemble the dress. I started with the darts. I pinned them together and stitched them, leaving some thread to make a knot later on. The next part was pinning, sewing and pressing the shoulder seams of the bodice as well as pressing the darts. Looking back, I should have sewed the shoulder seam right side together, so the seam allowance could be hidden under the facing. You'll see my problems caused by that error later on. I moved on to preparing the facing, which was firstly the shoulder seam, as well as turning all the edges over by 1 centimeter, so I could sew them onto the bodice later on. So a little update, I just pinned on the red facing. This gets sewn on left side to right side, so this will actually turn out and cover the top like this and be like a decorative band around the neck and the armhole, obviously. I stitched all around the neckline and then trimmed the seam allowance down, and also notched the parts where the neckline is curved. Then I finished the shoulder seams of the bodice by hand with an edge stitch. This step would have been unnecessary if I would have sewn the shoulder seam of the bodice left side to left side, because as I said it would have been hidden under the facing. But oh well, finishing your seam allowance with a hand stitch was quite common in the 50s, so I didn't mind too much. The armholes got finished with a weird method I made up last year, which turned out to be actually the right method of doing it. I did this by rolling up the opposite side of the bodice. Turned the facing over the rolled up garment and pinned it again to the main bodice. Then I carefully sewed it to make sure that I don't sew over the garment. Then the bodyskirt turned right side out by pulling it through the facing. And there it was, very neatly finished. That's the back right here, and I slip stitched yesterday evening the whole facing down, so you can barely see the stitches. I will iron over it, and yeah, on the front as well. And on the inside it looks kind of funny because you have this, I don't know if you can see this, but there are those little running stitches. It looks kind of funny there in red, but it doesn't bother me. So what I will do is sewing the side seam, and then I'm gonna press everything and install a zipper for trying it on and making a little fitting. And yeah. The side seam got finished with a tiny slip stitch, trying to catch just one thread of the main bodice, so the stitches don't show. On the other side, I pinned an invisible zipper in, with the teeth facing away from the opening. Then I stitched as close as I could with my zipper foot, but not so close that I catch the actual zipper teeth. This takes some practice, and without a proper invisible zipper foot this won't turn out perfect, but it's good enough for me. Then I tried the bodice on again to see if it all fits and started on the skirt. I started with the decorative tapes around the skirt. For them I cut 5 cm out of the same cotton sateen as I used for the facing, and I cut about a length of 6 meters. Then I joined 3 strips together twice, trimmed the seams and pressed the seams flat, and pressed over the edge of the strips about 1 cm, just on one side. I did this completely by eye because in the next step I made a line 3 cm away from the folded edge to get an accurate width of the strips. I marked the placement of the strips on the right side of the skirt panel with a water removable marker. . The 3 cm markings on the strips got then lined up with the markings on the skirt and sewed on. After sewing, I pressed the strips flat and pinned them on to sew them down by hand later. To connect top and bottom, I needed to measure around the waist to find out the final circumference. Then, with trial and error, I figured out that I need to make pleats with a depth of 3 cm and 1 cm apart. But that differs extremely with the width of the skirt and your waist measurement. My skirt was about 3 meters wide and the waist 78 centimeters. I think there are better, smarter and more straightforward ways to figure the pleat depth and placement out, but I did it with some confusing calculations and a lot of trial and error. But for that it went surprisingly well. I stitched the waist seam just after I pinned it, which shouldn't be done on a normal hobby machine, but mine is extraordinarily strong, since it's a vintage machine. So she has no problem with that. Normally I would iron the pleats and secure them with a straight stitch. But I had to rush through the dress, so sadly this hasn't happened. Since I was a bit in a rush when making this dress, I didn't film the final steps. So what I did is I sewed the invisible zipper down till the skirt and then finished up this seam right here. Then I made the hem, folded it over by 1 centimeter and then by about 9 centimeters and finished it off with a crisscross hem stitch where I just catched one thread of the fabric, so the stitches are practically invisible from the outside. Since this was the selvage, I just left it as it is and turned around and basted those red lines. Also the tapes, as I called them, were slip stitched down, so the stitching is also very not very noticeable. So that did take some time, I have to admit, but it was worth it in the end. And also the waist seam, and here's the waist seam, I finished it up by hand as well, but just turning it over and stitching it down with a whip stitch, trying to catch either just the seam allowance or the inside of the pleats, so it's also not visible from the outside. Here you can close it up again, and that's it. That is the finished garment. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks to everybody who subscribed to me in the last month. It's been really great that I have so many new people here and that they all leave so nice comments. It's really appreciated. And if you're new, please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment and a like, and thank you for watching.